The line is a civilization revolution.
And finally, our last story comes from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Reports say a cash crunch may have led to a rethink on the line, which is the centerpiece of Saudi Arabia's multi-billion-dollar mega future city, Neom.
Saudi Arabia is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. With its vast deposits of oil and natural gas resources, the country has managed to turn something that we can only call God-given into unimaginable wealth. Wealth which, by all indications, seems as if it wouldn't run dry.
Simply, we have in the past few issues in Saudi Arabia and a lot of opportunities that we didn't use. We're trying to capture that and to go forward for a better Saudi Arabia. And that's what we're trying to do.
Befitting a country of its stature, Saudi Arabia has been on a massive development spree in the past few years. And right now, the country appears to be enjoying the dividends of properly managing its resources. That said, part of Saudi Arabia's plans have also included some truly grandiose projects. While many of these projects are mainly focused on attracting more people to the country, some also serve as the backbone for what the government believes to be the future of Saudi's very civilization. One such project is the Line, a massive industrial undertaking expected to cost the kingdom at least $1 trillion. However, as ambitious as this project has been, it's also been shrouded in massive controversy. A controversy that now seems to be putting its very existence in doubt. So what is the Line, and why are there concerns over it? Let's dive into the full autopsy in this video. Saudi's rise to power. The growth of Saudi Arabia into one of the most advanced countries in the world is nothing short of awe-inspiring. I know we all look at the country as this shining beacon of wealth and advancement today, but it hasn't always been like that. As recently as the early 1900s, Saudi Arabia was pretty much a desert wasteland.
A vast, trackless desert, roadless, almost unknown, unmapped. In September 1933, two American geologists waded ashore on the nearby coast to begin a search in this strange, barren land.
The clip you just saw was from Saudi Arabia in 1933. At this period, the country was no more than just some other civilization in the Middle East that had very little relevance on the global stage. And by all accounts, there wasn't really anything interesting here that could attract anyone. Well, all of that changed in 1938. After several years of exploration and rigorous work, everything paid off with the discovery of Dammam Number 7, a well where commercial quantities of oil were first discovered in Saudi Arabia. The moment this oil was discovered, it opened the floodgates for explorers to come in and dig up even more oil in the country. And just like that, Saudi Arabia's oil boom commenced. Seeing the opportunity that this provided, the Saudi government immediately positioned the country to become the global leader in oil production and exportation. They set up a state-owned company called Saudi Aramco, which handled much of the country's oil-related operations, and from the late 40s, the company, as well as the country, only grew from strength to strength. Oil production milestones hit one record after another, while Saudi Arabia was also becoming more popular for its energy as well. Unlike most countries where resources are discovered and mismanaged, Saudi Arabia ensured that the gravy train never stopped. As oil was being extracted in record numbers, more countries and companies began coming to Saudi Arabia to tap and explore. They paid the country handsomely, and the government used this money to fund several development initiatives across the board. This essentially led to the Saudi Arabia we know today. By 2018, Saudi Arabia was producing a staggering 13.6 million barrels of oil a day, a significant rise from the 4,000 barrels a day being pumped out by demand number 7 back in the 30s. They were pumping more oil than any other country in the world, save for Russia and the United States, and at this point, it's safe to say that Saudi Arabia held a significant amount of sway, The country continued to maintain its position as a world power, especially as its oil continued to fuel vehicles, factories, and entire economies. In the same vein, Aramco continued to grow. In December 2019, the company's stock debuted on the Riyadh Stock Exchange, netting it an astounding $25.6 billion to become the largest initial public offering in history. The IPO gave the company a valuation of $1.7 trillion, making it the most valuable public firm in the world. And a few days later, Aramco shares soared on the back of rising oil prices, making it the world's first $2 trillion company. Now we should mention that several companies, including Apple, Microsoft, and Nvidia, have already passed Aramco in terms of valuation. Still, you can imagine this was a huge deal at the time, and it was an indicator of just how powerful the Saudi state had become. Even with the push towards renewables and other alternative sources of energy, oil has remained resilient, and it's understandable to see why. Alternative energy sources will do our planet a whole lot of good, but it will take a while before these sources become scalable and mainstream. In that time, the world's demand for oil and fossil fuels will continue to rise, and this means that Saudi Arabia will continue to be a major player on the global stage. Saudi Arabia has also done a very solid job of keeping itself grounded, even in the face of the immense wealth it has derived from its abundance of oil. You see, unlike many other countries that have much of their wealth tied to their natural resources, the Saudis have been very judicious in how they spend their money. The moment the oil money began pumping in, they invested it back into their country, taking it from a barren wasteland to an oasis in the desert. Thanks to countries like Dubai, Kuwait, and Qatar, the Middle East has become one of the wealthiest regions in the world. But make no mistake, the wealth of these nations pales in comparison to that of Saudi Arabia. Besides the investment in the people, Saudi Arabia has also done pretty well to diversify its holdings away from oil. You see, like many others, the Saudis are very much aware that this oil money won't be around forever. Someday, whether it's next year or a half century from now, that oil money won't be around anymore. It could be because the oil wells dry up, or maybe because renewables suddenly become mainstream and no one needs fossil fuels anymore. Whatever it is, the Saudis are working on being and staying ready. To do this, the Saudi government launched the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund in 1971. The Sovereign Wealth Fund was established by then-King Faisal bin Abdulaziz Al Saud by a royal decree, with the stated goal of providing financing support for projects of strategic significance to the national economy. For much of its history, the Saudi Wealth Fund was a passive entity that oversaw the Saudi state's equity in listed firms. However, the moment neighboring petrostates began using their sovereign wealth funds for influence, Saudi Arabia followed them. Today, Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund is the sixth most valuable in the world, with an estimated $925 billion in assets under management. Its portfolio includes the SoftBank Group, Riyadh Bank, electric car maker Lucid Motors, Uber, and the Blackstone Group, the world's largest alternative investment firm, with over $1 trillion in assets under management. The investment fund also owns an 8% stake in Saudi Aramco, a stake which at current prices is valued at about $145 billion alone. Safe to say, this sovereign wealth fund is doing pretty well for itself. The line, humanity's futuristic city. In general, the goal of the Saudi government is to prepare the country for a time when it would no longer be able to live off the revenues it gets from exporting oil. However, besides just that, the government is also looking to invest in the country and make it more advanced. From initiatives to attract investment to those that make the country a more tourist attraction, you could say that the Saudi government is trying to make sure that the country remains viable and relevant to the future of the planet. To do this, the Saudi government has invested in several initiatives. However, it's safe to say that none of these initiatives has been quite as ambitious as the line. In 2021, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, announced the line. And to hear him talk about it, this was a project that would pretty much change civilization as we know it and get humanity ready for the future.
وسوف تتضاعف هذه المدة في 2050. في 2050 سوف يهجر مليار إنسان بسبب ارتفاع انبعاثات الكربون وارتفاع منسوب مياه البحار. 90% من البشر يتنفسون هواء ملوث؟ لماذا نقبل أن نضحي بالطبيعة في سبيل التنمية؟ ولماذا يتوفى 7 مليون إنسان سنوياً بسبب التلوث؟ ولماذا نفقد 1 مليون إنسان سنوياً بسبب الحوادث المرورية؟ ولماذا نقبل أن تهدر سنين من حياة الإنسان في التنقل؟ لذلك نحن بحاجة إلى تجديد مفهوم المدن إلى مدن مستقبلية. اليوم بصفتي رئيس مجلس إدارة نيوم نقدم لكم ذا لاين، مدينة مليونية بطول 170 كيلو تحافظ على 95% من الطبيعة في أراضي نيوم، 0 سيارات، 0 شوارع، و0 انبعاثات كربونية.
Pretty sweet, right? Well, that was kind of the point. You see, up until this point, there had been a lot of controversy surrounding MBS. He had risen to become crown prince in a whirlwind succession and brought about sweeping socio-economic reforms aimed at modernizing Saudi Arabia. However, there had also been some criticism of his administration, so his reception was a bit of a mixed bag. Looking to put all of this behind him, MBS announced the line as a project that would redefine Saudi Arabia, and boy was the scope large. According to the official proposal, the line was expected to be a city that measured 170 kilometers in length, 200 meters in width, and 500 meters in height. It was expected to be a straight city that would cut right across the Saudi desert, holding 9 million people in what we can only describe as a futuristic settlement. The line was advertised as the future of vertical living, a new urban way of settling that would allow people to live closer than ever, fostering social interaction and cultural exchange. At the same time, it was also part of the Saudi government's Vision 2030, which aimed to diversify the kingdom's portfolio and cut its reliance on oil revenues by the turn of the decade. It is operated by the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, which MBS himself also chairs. Besides this, the line was envisioned as a city without roads or cars, where everything that citizens would need over the course of their daily lives was just a few minutes away. A high-speed rail would be available to take residents from one end of the line to the other in less than half an hour, and the city would even be monitored by a sophisticated artificial intelligence technology that ensured that everything within it would continue to run smoothly. A year after the line was announced, it was confirmed that work had indeed begun on the project. Drone footage showed excavators being used to dredge up deep into the barren desert land, creating what would be the foundations for Saudi's overly futuristic city. At the same time, the Saudi government estimated that it would be able to begin housing people here by 2024. Much hype, less work done. Nevertheless, it didn't take too long for people to begin questioning this project. Immediately after the line was announced, it was met with criticism and doubt as to its feasibility and long-term impact. For one, the line was expected to be built directly on the Saudi desert. In fact, early explorations of the proposed site revealed that only 2 resources were available here: excess sunlight and an abundance of salt water. Every other resource needed to build the city would need to be transported there, and as you can imagine, this would be an incredible undertaking. According to the official announcement, the line was expected to cost about $200 billion to build, which seemed feasible at the time when you consider the immense wealth of the Saudi state. It would definitely hurt their pockets, but hey, such is the price of advancement. However, in a very short while, it became quite obvious that this $200 billion wouldn't cut it. Supplementary estimates claimed that the project would now take at least $500 billion, an amount which, even for the Saudis, seemed pretty excessive. Still, the Saudi government, headed by MBS, continued to push for this project. And at the moment, well, let's just say that things are not exactly going as planned. In April 2024, a report on Bloomberg revealed that the Saudi government was scaling back on its plans to build the line. Citing people with insider knowledge, Bloomberg reported that the plans for the line, which included a partially built structure that would be able to house about 1.5 million people by 2030, had been reduced drastically. Instead, the line was now expected to house just a little over 300,000 by the turn of the decade, a mere 1/5 of the initial figure. That wasn't all, though. Bloomberg also reported that the line would only measure about 2.4 kilometers in length by 2030, a far cry from the 170 kilometers that had initially been planned. Due to the reduction, many of the contractors working on the line had also cut their workforce significantly, as high-ranking Saudi government workers had now been looking for ways to mitigate the damage done as a result of not meeting expectations. Satellite images from earlier this year also showed that there is still no structure formed on the land designated for the line, all that there are a few gated communities and offices for the people who work there physically. The images show the foundational work done on the designated land, but that's pretty much it. Nothing else. Mohammed Al-Jaddah, Saudi Arabia's finance minister, even stated that the requisite factories and human infrastructure needed to facilitate much of this project wouldn't be ready until past 2030. He did state that delays such as these were good for the project in the long term, but it's safe to say that optimism for the project's completion right now is at a low point. Since the Bloomberg piece was published, many in Saudi Arabia's government have been quick to push back against it. Faisal Al-Ibrahim, the country's economic minister, said to an interviewer that the project isn't scaling back and is moving full steam ahead. So you might be asking, what exactly happened here? How is it that a project hyped up to be the future of human civilization turned out to be riddled with doubt and a loss of confidence in just a matter of 3 years?
Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's dream project may have hit a roadblock. Reports say a cash crunch may have led to a rethink on the line, which is the centerpiece of Saudi Arabia's multi-billion-dollar mega future city, Neom.
Well, like many projects of this scale, there have been a plethora of issues plaguing the line. And when you combine these issues, it really isn't too difficult to see how things might have gone wrong. Perhaps the most prominent of these challenges is monetary. As I said, the line, as well as many other ambitious projects being developed by the Saudi government, is being primarily operated by the Public Investment Fund. Now, while the fund holds a portfolio of assets worth about $925 billion, it is worth noting that this money isn't liquid. I mean, the Sovereign Wealth Fund can't just pull $925 billion and dump it on the line. So how much does the fund actually have? Well, according to Bloomberg, the fund's cash reserves sit at about $15 billion, the lowest they've been since 2020 when the Saudi government began releasing data on the fund's holdings. $15 billion is honestly peanuts compared to how much will be needed to develop the line. And even though the Saudi government is committed to building this project, I think it's safe to say that it won't be able to do it on its own. At the moment, the Public Investment Fund is working around the clock to convince investors to chip in and bring the line to life. However, we should also remember that the world is in a bit of flux at the moment. In 2021 and 2022, a global recession hit and economies were significantly affected. Companies had to deal with huge blows to their valuations, while countries also saw their economic sizes shrink. As a result, it's not like there's any company or individual standing around with a bale of cash ready to dump it on anyone and anything. And with the investment field now drying up, there really isn't much money waiting in the halls. Plus, it's worth remembering that the line isn't the only project being built by the Saudi government. In fact, the line is just a component of Neom, the futuristic city that is being developed by Saudi Arabia. Neom is expected to include several other massive, ambitious projects, including a floating seaport, a world-class airport, a mountain resort, a cultural center, and so much more. Each of these projects is just as ambitious and seemingly unbelievable in scale as the line, and as you can imagine, they'd be almost as expensive. Catering to all of these isn't child's play.
According to reports, the plans for the mirror-clad desert metropolis have been scaled down and the city is far from reaching its 2030 target. Is this the end of the line for the Crown Prince's dream project?
Besides the monetary challenge, the line has also developed a reputation for being a pretty intense place for workers. You see, the issue here appears to begin with a man known as Nadhmi Al-Najjar, the CEO of the Neom project and one of the closest allies of Crown Prince bin Salman. According to sources, Al-Nasser can be a bit of a challenging man to work with. He is notorious for poaching foreigners, including mechanics, engineers, urban planners, architects, and other experts, and bringing them into Saudi Arabia to work with him. Still, he's also known to constantly go out of his way to intimidate and belittle these employees. To make things worse, Al-Nasser himself doesn't necessarily deny this characterization. According to a report from the Wall Street Journal, he reveled in his hardcore working style in a meeting, claiming that he drives everyone like slaves and celebrates when they break down and can't go on anymore. Sheesh. I don't even know what that means, but answer this: if your boss spoke that way, would you be willing to work for him? Yeah, I guess not. Al-Nasser has been criticized on several fronts for disparaging his colleagues, demeaning them, and even engaging in discrimination across his organization. And when you consider the many allegations of human rights abuses that have been leveled against the Saudi government over the years, you can kind of see why this isn't a good look in general. To make things worse, everyone still remembers the many reports of terrible working conditions that laborers in Qatar had to face as the country geared up to host the 2022 FIFA World Cup. And if Qatar could be that bad, imagine just how much worse Saudi Arabia would be. All of these have led to tens of thousands of workers feeling anxious about working in Saudi Arabia on the line, as well as the other infrastructural developments that make up the NEOM project. No one knows the details of the conditions that current workers are facing, but you can understand how prospective workers could feel a bit antsy. The people working on the line aren't the only ones in danger. According to reports, the construction of this project, as well as the others that make up NEOM, is being done on land that is historically owned by the Hawaitat, a large Judami tribe that inhabits much of southwestern Saudi Arabia. Many of these people have lived on their land for centuries, and according to reports, they are being forced out of it just so the Saudi government can build its projects. So far, the reports concerning how the Hawaitat have been treated are pretty concerning. According to sources, the Hawaitat were issued eviction orders as the Saudi government wanted to use their land. They were offered terribly inadequate compensation packages in return, and when they resisted, they were either accused of terrorism and forcibly put in jail or were outrightly killed. A panel of experts from the United Nations also cited cases where prisoners were being tortured and forced to make false confessions implicating themselves, when in reality all they wanted was to protect their land. As of now, there has yet to be any remedy provided for the eviction of the Hawaitat people, about 6,000 of them who were sent away from their land. On the other hand, Saudi Arabia has so far denied any wrongdoing, claiming instead that the Hawaitats who were jailed were found to have links to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. To make things worse, many investors are now looking to distance themselves from this project entirely. Most of them are aware of the allegations against Al-Nasser, and as you can imagine, no one would want to be associated with a project that's directly responsible for treating workers so poorly. Now, inasmuch as this whole humanitarian issue isn't a minor one, the truth is that this isn't Saudi Arabia's first rodeo. Heck, the country has literally had one humanitarian crisis after another in its long history. And as usual, you would think they'd be able to solve the problem by just throwing a wad of cash on it and making it go away. The problem, though, is that this isn't quite the same. For one, as we mentioned earlier, Saudi Arabia is running low on disposable cash, and because of that, they need to be more prudent than ever. At the same time, there also seems to be a major issue with a very critical partner, Israel. Just as Saudi Arabia began the process of designing and building everything in NEOM, the country also began cooling tensions with Israel, another nation in the Middle Eastern region that's had a long, tense history with the Saudis. As these relations began to cool off, more Israeli investors began getting more enamored with the prospect of investing in Saudi Arabia. To be fair, the prospects were simple. Israel and Saudi Arabia were arguably the two strongest economies in the Middle East, and by ensuring bilateral investment relationships between them, both countries could enter a new age where they could look past ideological differences and become chummy with each other. For the first time in maybe ever, there was the prospect of peace in the Middle East, and this peace would have been brokered like most deals were, with a wad of cash. Well, all of the progress made on that front has now been halted thanks to the Israel-Hamas war. The conflict kicked into full gear in October 2023, and everyone's been on edge since then. Much of the money that would have been invested into Saudi Arabia's futuristic city has now been tied up, as it appears more and more likely that the prospects of peace in this region might be long gone. To make things worse, the United States has generally played the observer role in this region, and even at that, the US seems to be edging more towards supporting Israel in this conflict than Saudi Arabia, so really it seems like the Saudis are on their own. Finally, it's also important to tackle the question at the heart of this whole project: would people want to live on the line? Look, I know the whole project has been dubbed a futuristic city that will usher in the new age of mankind's civilization. But let's not act like we don't know what it is: an opportunity for Saudi Arabia to attract the ultra-wealthy and ensure that its place on the global stage is preserved. Sure, these wealthy people would be attracted to the prospect of living here. It's ostentatious, and they also benefit from things like a permissive tax code and a loose legal system. Still, the line's operation as an AI-powered smart city where data about every citizen is collected might not be so attractive for a country with autocratic tendencies. Giving an all-powerful piece of AI access to complete data might not exactly be the best idea. Nevertheless, the Saudi government is pushing on. Despite the mounting challenges and skepticism, Crown Prince bin Salman remains adamant that his city will indeed be built. Although the Saudi government might not want to admit it, it's pretty clear that the progress made on the line isn't exactly what they had hoped. Still, if there's one thing you can be sure of, it's that these guys have something up their sleeve. For now, only time will tell if this megacity project will be accomplished. What do you think, though? Is the line really set to be what was promised, or will it just be a dud project? Let us know in the comments.